Hi all, I have a very interesting game to show you of Bobby Fischer today. This was against Pal Benko in the 1965 US Championship. The previous year Fischer had dominated with 100%. He still played some brilliant games in the 1965 Championship, and I believe this can be regarded as one of them. So white against Pal Benko, e4. Benko plays into, we have the Royal Paz, and in particular we have one of our current world champions favourites, the Brer variation, coming up, because after h3 this knight retreat, which aims to reroute and maybe c5 later, we have d4, knight bd7. But already on move 11 Fischer plays quite an interesting, tricky looking move. This is off the beaten track, which is usually a move like knight bd2. Fischer plays knight h4. It's an interesting pawn sacrifice. It's a pawn sack because knight takes e4 is possible, hitting the knight. But on knight f5, white actually gets some very interesting compensation here. For example, there's queen f3 now hitting the rook. And things can get really interesting. If black casually plays rook b8, well, things just get quite interesting here, because bishop g5, there's pressure here, and potentially a lot of pins. Things like knight a3, rook ad1 and d takes will have pins on f6 and d7. So very interesting active possibilities. But Pal Benko didn't want to get into all this stuff. He didn't want to punish that knight just yet, so he played knight b6. He's looking basically to double white's pawns. If ever knight f5, then surely black can just take and double white's pawns. But of course, you know, there's ups and downs of that. Knight d2 is played here. Now, in this position, again, knight takes e4 is interesting to consider, but there's pressure on e5 here, so white could get the pawn back anyway. So again, this knight e4 is ignored. At the very least, also, even though knight f5 has been taken out of the equation. So c5 is played instead. Fischer plays d takes c5. And now, finally, something is done about this knight. Knight f5. At the cost of some structural damage, though. Bishop takes f5. E takes f5. It does give white the e4 square, though. And also the pawn on f5, quite an advanced aggressive pawn, the most aggressive pawn in the position, the one that stepped onto the fifth, can be emphasized with g4, g5, but would this be too weakening for white's king? Well, in fact, this is exactly how Fischer plays, like a mad caveman in this game. He plays g4. The thing is, how can black actually exploit this? There are dark square weaknesses. You might think f4 is the key one, but for the moment, you know, black is threatened with things like g5 and g6 potentially. So he tries to put the brakes on white's pawns for the moment, and then work on, in particular, the f4 square. Fischer again plays like a caveman in this game with h4. We have now c4, which gives the bishop c5. You might think this is really quite good. Bishop c2, knight h7, hitting the pawn on h4. That's protected. f6. But black is clamming up here a little bit just to put a break on g5. This knight does not look particularly active on h7. There may have been better ways of playing this position. And in fact, white's knight improves itself. Knight d2 going to that strong e4 square. So now after rook ad8, unpinning with queen f3. h5, again, this looks pretty double-edged for black to do, to try and disrupt white's pawn structure, especially with the black king on g8. Even though it crumbles white's structure, the g file is going to be dangerous, surely. G takes h5. Now here, yes, although the pawns are like doubled here and here, doesn't matter. White's got a lot of upsides based on that. The g file, strong e4 square, and you know, black king as a target, the knight on h7 isn't particularly good. So disregarding the structure, white does seem to have overall the upper hand here. But what about the f4 square? Well, knight d5 aims for f4. Knight e4 covering f4 with the bishop. And black now decides to go in anyway. That's snapped off. E takes, and now there's a direct plan here, just build up on the g file. It's the thing to do. There's a strong knight on e4 which is difficult to challenge here. This miserable counterpart on h7 just stranded there for a moment. White just plays king h1. Simple idea, just to build pressure on the g file. King h8. Black tries to defend via g8 or f7 soon. It's pretty passive stuff though. White's just building some pressure here. And now after bishop f8, there's a slight back row issue tapped into with h6. A lot of pressure. Black dare not take because it will be mate. So we have here queen e5, but now even more pressure put on black with queen g4. So threatening hg. Black defends laterally again. But now after f3, this position is getting almost like a zugzwang feel to it because the knight can't move, the bishop can't move. Can the rooks really move? The knight on e4 is looking to put a lot of pressure on the position. It looks pretty scary stuff. We see bishop c5 here, attacking the rook. White snaps this off, and another pawn is taken. Rook takes g7. Rook takes g7, so white is not only undoubling the pawns, but this pawn looks like a menace on g7. And here we see queen g6. Now there's an immediate subtle or not so subtle threat in this position. I wonder if you can spot it, which explains a little bit black's next move. If I give you 5 seconds here, if white had another move, what would he play in this position? So 5 seconds to pause the video now. Okay, the threat is queen takes h7. So for example, here, as a token move, then g8, queening, and then queen g6. So black retreats to d8. We see bishop e4. And now this is really interesting. It shows how much we can analyze positions nowadays. I saw a comment earlier when researched this game on chessgames.com that black committed suicide here with the move queen c8. In fact, black's position is dead lost technically. The move suggested by the committer was queen e5. This is pretty bad, but before we go into that, let's look at the game continuation and come back to this position. So black played queen c8. And it seems everything's defended for the moment. Can white really make progress? Is this a clever defensive strategy from black to have the knight on h7 defending f6, to have this pawn helping defend the black king? What can possibly go wrong with this defensive setup? Well, Fischer plays a brilliant move, which brings this game out from the crowds of games actually. It's an absolutely brilliant, sensational finish in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here with white? Okay, queen e8. It's an absolutely brilliant deflection of the rook away from d5. It just wins material. It wins the exchange basically. Rook takes is forced, bishop d5, and whatever way this is defended now, this check, white's winning material. For example, rook e6, we take, and we're just the exchange up, and black can't move his king, can't move anything really. It's over. Yeah, this is absolutely a crushing check here. Now, if we just rewind for a moment, it's seeing this claim that black committed suicide with queen c8. Well, on queen e5, if you happen to have a commercial chess engine or a strong chess engine, you might find it's actually a forced mate in 10 in this position. And the reason it's a forced mate in 10 is because white can reinforce the g7 pawn to seal a mating net. For example, like this. Let's imagine black plays like this. Then we have rook e1. And the idea here is to coordinate on e8, which will be mating. For example, bishop d5 check, queen e8, and this is mating. It's actually a false mate in 10, based on queen e5, so it's hardly a position where black committed suicide. There's basically a winning plan, a checkmate plan in this position, which is in fact a false mate in 10 after queen e5. White simply gets the pawn to h6, arranges rook e1 for bishop d5. You might want to try and dispute that, but check it. It's a false mate in 10 after queen e5 in this game. And this sort of analysis is obviously not possible like years back, but it's just dead black's position by force. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game, and it showed some very dynamic aggressive play from Fischer, you know, like caveman attack. But once he installed these pawns around the black king, the tactics were really quite beautiful. And the final beautiful tactic is obviously a great celebration of that g7 pawn as well, deflecting away from d5. So I hope you enjoyed that. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.